Hello and welcome to SEMPI Real Conversations. My name is Elise Price-Tobler, and on today's show I have my very, very special guest, Carolyn Cook, who's coming all the way to me from America. So we're going to be talking about things that have and how she's become the woman that she is now and sort of what's led up to it. And Carolyn has an amazingly powerful voice out there in the land of mental health. And for those of you on Twitter who know her, she's also known as Carolyn the Connector. So she likes to bring a lot of people together out there and covers a broad range of mental health services as well. So welcome, Carolyn. I'm really, really excited to have you on SEMPI Real Conversations today with me. And we'll get started straight into the interview if that's all right with you.
That sounds good.
Okay. That accent is awesome. So tell us, where are you at the moment?
I'm in San Jose, California.
All right, so I'm just going to go through a little bit of things that I know about you. So I've done a bit of homework on you, and I also know you on several social media platforms. So I know that you're a photographer. I know that you're a writer. I know that you're a legal secretary. I know that you're working in retail at the moment. And I suppose one of the really, really strong messages that we want to get out today is the fact that the stigma out there in the society that we all live in at the moment, and the judgment towards people who are not having the best of times and might find themselves with a mental health issue or homeless on the street or couch surfing, it can happen in a heartbeat. And this is the story that we want to talk about today, because this is exactly what's happened to Carolyn, and she's come through the other side and is now doing amazing things for the world out there. So let's start with very, very beginning, when you were working as a legal secretary right back in 2014, and you were running towards a friend's house. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened with that event?
Okay, well, about a couple months before I went to my friend's house, so I started working in my financial education business, and one evening I went over to a friend's house, and unknowingly running up to the house, I caught my foot on the curb and went flying face first into the pavement. And because of my previous injuries with my hands, I wasn't able to catch myself. So I ended up with a concussion that I thought was very minor at the time. And I was still able to function right away. The headaches started right away. I thought, well, I've got a concussion definitely, but I'll be able to pick myself up and still continue to work and, do as I had seen other people do, is just keep on going. But about 5 months later from the concussion, the PTSD came in, and it was only a conversation that started the fear and panic, and from there on in, everything just came crumbling down, and I ended up by the end of the year losing my focus, losing my ability to concentrate and work, losing my income, so becoming homeless by the end of December of 2014. It was a succession of a couple of different injuries, and no one else to rely on or fall back on as far as being dependent with someone else, that I ended up homeless in a matter of months. It was literally 10 months. And from being homeless and evicting myself from bad decisions out of my place and not having a place to stay, financially, I had nothing to fall back on and ended up living in my car. And then in 2015, I had a little bit of help for a few months from a friend and was allowed to stay on her house for a couple of months.
So you were couch surfing?
Yeah, just with the one friend, and because I couldn't focus and couldn't get another place to stay, It was not only me that was homeless, it was part of my family too. I ended up living in my car about a couple months into 2015. And I tried to focus on work. I tried to find on other jobs. I actually tried to start another nonprofit at the time because I saw a need, and I was getting help walking through that by people who cared about me and wanted me to move forward. But I knew I wasn't well. So
Mm.
by the end of July 2015, my car broke down. And
Okay.
that was completely the last straw because I had no safe place to stay. And I ended up in the neighborhood of one of the industrial streets in my little small town and slept on the sidewalk, close to the sidewalk where I know no one could see me. Um, and I ended up being homeless there on the side. I'd get up in the morning, put my stuff away in storage because I was staying right where my stuff was actually located. And I felt the connection and I just couldn't leave it. And
Okay, so sorry. So at this point, you'd gone from couch surfing, which is also classified as being under the banner of homelessness, to now
yep,
rough sleeping, which is the very serious end of
yep,
homelessness. Just for people who are listening out there who aren't sure what homelessness, all the different definitions mean. Sleeping in the car is also classified as
yep,
being homeless, but now you're rough
yes,
sleeping and sleeping on concrete in an industrial area, and you're
yep.
still unwell at this point from the.
I'm still unwell by the end of July 2015. So you're looking at the injury that first happened the beginning of 2014 all the way into 2015. I'm still suffering with it. And it's not like I didn't try to get help from a neurologist or from my general practitioner or even counseling in 2015 to kind of help take the edge off and get the anxiety away. But by the time I lost my car, I really lost a sense of independence and at least having some safety at night. So rough sleeping on the sidewalk was where I was at next to a fire hydrant. And I had people that checked on me once a week. And actually, someone in the business, one of the businesses that I was staying near, came out every morning and checked on me. I was able to get food. I was able to put my stuff away, clean up after myself so no one would notice I was there at night because I didn't leave anything out in the open to where people could assume, oh, someone's camping there. That I just didn't do that. And if you saw me walking on the street now with no car, you would have never known that I was homeless.
Yeah.
Um, and I got that question quite often. You're not rough sleeping. You look too clean. You look too organized. You're having a decent conversation with me. You can't be rough sleeping. Well, yeah, I am.
So,
And
can
then,
I ask you a question, Carolyn? On that
uh-huh.
note, I did my master's degree thesis on women who were sleeping rough and stigma towards them from the general public. So, what sort of stigma did you feel from the general public, or were the general public really nice to you, or was there a particular group that weren't very nice to you?
You know, it was definitely a place of being taken advantage of. It didn't matter if it was a church group, and I know I'm going to get hated for that, um, or just someone who thought they knew me from a year or two ago, or other people who had just met me. They could see that I had had an injury by, just me telling them that it was a succession of events that got me here. But I think for the most part, I had run-ins with good people. Um, but it was a very difficult position to be in as a woman. I couldn't go and join the rough sleeper group because I felt threatened.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
it's very
I
hard.
felt that I would have been taken advantage of sexually, and I didn't want any more trauma to affect my life. So, and the
And
homeless people that met me, you could clearly tell they were out for themselves and wanted something else. And I think even one afternoon, there was a young Hispanic woman that tried to traffic me to Mexico. And that didn't happen. So I was quite careful to the point where it started making me paranoid being out there in the open. It really did. And it wasn't just friends that would maybe drop by and see me or bump into me. It was other people when I was traveling in my car that would bump into me. It made me feel uncomfortable because I knew I wasn't well. I knew I wasn't capable of making decisions. And other people, I just didn't trust anybody but family. And I didn't feel like I could be anywhere else but with family. And I wasn't going to go home with anybody else other than family. That was the point. When you're rough sleeping, people are just out to get you and take advantage of you. You're a woman.
And for those people out there who are watching this saying, why didn't you go into a shelter? And as we know, there's hardly any shelters out there that are long-term for women. And what was your experience of it? Because I don't want to taint what you're going to say with what I know from being a professional in the field and working in those places.
I tried going in a shelter when I first became homeless in my car. I tried to spend more than 3 nights there, and on the third night, a man had started approaching me while I was trying to sleep. And I'll be honest, the staff just turned their back. And I felt pressured for about, probably went on for an hour, and it wasn't about my purse. He did not want me there because it just didn't look like I needed to be there.
So he was judging you.
Yeah, he did not want me there, maybe because I took someone else's space. And when I complained about it a couple hours later and said, look, he's accosting me, she's like, nothing's going on. And so I literally got my bag, my purse together, my coat, and I walked out to my car and decided from then on there I was sleeping in my car.
Okay. So the only safe place you were feeling was in the car.
Yep. And there was no place to really go and get services that would help you transition to a home or a room without you being under the assumption that you were addicted. I was not addicted.
No.
I was not drinking. I was not using drugs. I had a head injury earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, I was homeless.
So that's how quick.
Yes.
That's how quick. And this, I'm sorry to stop you there, Carolyn, but I'm just like in the Twitter conversation this morning, we were talking about the stigma between workers and people with mental health issues or people who are homeless, and how this really needs to stop, this power imbalance, because what people don't realize, it can happen to them in a heartbeat, like it happened to you. And for you to stand up now where you are and be talking from your home is amazing. And congratulations and well done to you. And there'll be a lot of women watching this who'll think that your story is very, very amazing. And anyone who's out there judging Carolyn at the moment, I want you to just stop doing that. Open your heart and just listen to her empathically. Okay.
Well, I think you have to realize that the injury was the beginning of 2014. By the end of 2014, I couldn't concentrate. I actually evicted myself out of the home. 2015, the beginning of 2015, I was still suffering with PTSD, but I was in my car. And then the rest of 2015, the PTSD finally relieved, And by October, even though I didn't have a car, I became of the mindset I had more peace in my mind and more peace in my heart too. There was no more struggle. Um, I made the decision that I didn't belong there. I didn't deserve to be there. I wanted my life back.
Okay.
I wanted my kids back. And without that decision, I wouldn't have reached out one more time to my family, my daughter, and I wouldn't have decided whatever is coming next. I need to just get through so I can get off the street.
Okay, so it was that thought that kept you going, because I know
Yes.
earlier when we were talking, you said that during the day was very lonely for you as well, and you would walk around a lot, and you would listen
Yes.
to music, and you would listen to really positive, empowering podcasts and TED Talks. And
Yes.
during this time, a lot of the agencies didn't come and help you. I'm wondering about that too. So here's
No.
a homeless woman on the street with all the agencies and all the people and all the frontline workers that we have, and they just...
Nope. Nope, they didn't. They assumed that number one, my family was going to scoop me up, and that I would just be, brought back into the house. And with all the anxiety in the evening, because I was on the street by myself, my anxiety kind of increased in the evening, and I would text in the evening. And my family had not seen me in months in person and really didn't know how to take the text other than that it sounded like I was angry. And I was probably upset that I felt abandoned.
Sure.
So that came across. And when I reached out in the end of October and said, I need to get off the street. You got to help me. I want my life back. I don't know what triggered my daughter to get in the car and come down and get me at the hospital. But that was where it ended and we moved forward. But the next year was a struggle also.
So can I just
The
back
home.
you up a little bit, because we've missed a bit of the story. I don't know if you want to talk about when you fell over when you were on the street and hurt yourself, or you want to skip that.
No, we can talk about it. When I was without a car after July of 2015, I would walk through the town. I would walk all over the town. It was a very small town, and I felt very safe during the day. At night, I made sure I was in my spot all the time at night and ready and nowhere else to go, and no one else could find me. But yeah, in October, I had fallen down one more time. It was just a moment of panic. Um, and I'll be honest, I thought the sheriff or the police car that was driving by was going to stop and arrest me because I was homeless. Because that was a reoccurring thought for me, being homeless. And I ended up falling on my nose again, and it was injured. And so that was when it was, okay, this has got to end. I got to get off the street. This has got to stop. And I don't belong here. And from that point on, it was, I wanted my family back and I wanted my life back. And I knew that there had to have been a purpose for my struggle. I know that sounds really
No,
hard
I
to
totally agree with
say.
that. I subscribe to that as well. I think
Yeah.
I hear you when you say that. I think a lot of growth and insight and lived experience, if we can glean all the positive stuff out of what we've been through, that leads us to be able to help others and hear others. And I see you doing this all the time. I mean, you have over
Right.
5,000 people on Twitter following you at this point. And like, how long have you been on Twitter for?
Uh, well, to be quite honest, I opened up those two Twitter sites when I was sick
Okay.
in 2015, and it was just an idea that I wrote about equality for women in particular, because I was watching a lot of videos on Facebook of women being abused. So I wrote about it, and I gave it a movement name, and it kind of got out there while I was homeless, so I shut it down
Okay.
because I knew I wasn't prepared to to work with that. And so when I started writing in March of 2018, I thought, my going through this struggle, there has to be a purpose. There has to be other people out there suffering this way. I'm not alone.
No.
I talked to way too many people who had suffered as I did and yet still remained homeless. And I knew that I wasn't supposed to stay there homeless if I was going to bring this forward and start talking about it. And so in March of 2018, I felt comfortable enough to write a little bit about it and start opening up the door, because I knew I still needed to learn a lot more of how it evolved, where it actually started from, what helped it in the process of me becoming homeless, which I truly think is part of generational trauma from my mom.
Because your mum was homeless,
Yeah.
wasn't she?
She was homeless when she was a teenager in World War II, and
Right.
she talked about it.
Right.
And then she was also homeless for a while when she met her second husband, and they weren't married. She wasn't allowed to stay in the housing unit, but she had 2 kids. And we were floating around, and I didn't know this until years later after I was growing up. And I finally put the pieces together. But she kind of laid the groundwork. I think I would have, even without the assault that I had suffered years later, I think something similar would have happened eventually with PTSD that would have brought in all of her memories that she kind of walked me through her trauma.
Okay.
And I don't really think that you should share your war-torn trauma with your kids.
No, it's not the right people to talk to. No.
No. I mean, if you're still having issues with it, and I'm not saying you don't need to talk about it.
No.
You need to talk to a counselor who can help walk you through those traumatic.
Yes. Yes, we do see a lot of parents inappropriately talking to children about their traumas and events that happen to them, and classic is divorce. I mean, how many people do you know talk to their children about their divorce and what's going through? It's terrible. That comes under the banner of parental alienation, just while we're on the subject. So, and parental alienation, for those of you out there who aren't sure what that is, this is just a bit of a side note. It's when a couple are starting to be divorced or have become divorced, and one parent is talking badly about the other in front of the child.
At first, in my divorce, I didn't do that. I didn't own up to that. But later on, when we actually separated and everything, I am guilty, and I heard things back that he said bad about me. So it works both ways.
Yeah, it does.
But as the years grew on, I spent a lot of time, old friends would meet up with us, and I did pay it forward. I did tell other friends. A couple years later, it took me a while to settle with it, and said, you know what, I couldn't have asked for better help with their dad.
Okay.
He's still involved with their lives. He still helps us financially. And I said it often enough to kind of make up for the way I had treated him badly about a year after we separated. I said it enough afterwards that it came back to him and he told me about it.
Okay, wonderful work, Carolyn, because I wish so many other more couples would do that, because we don't come with the rule book around what happens when we're divorced and how we should speak to children and refer to our exes and all that sort of stuff. We just don't come with a rule book. But number one rule for anyone out there listening, don't talk to your children about trauma.
And that's the point. I think a lot of times, even when it's divorce, even the friends lead into it. Oh, he was so bad that blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no. It was a two-way street. And I've had more help even after the divorce. And he helped us get a home, and he helped us do this, and he helped us do that. that it had to wipe away their offered resentment to kind of console me. And it's like, no, no, no. We're being taken care of,
Yeah.
whether he remarried or not. He still owns up to his duty, and it got back to him,
Good.
and that
Wonderful.
I
Wonderful.
made
Because
peace with.
we do
Yeah,
have some amazing men in the world too. Yeah. Who
yeah, we
in
do.
divorce do step up, and we love our men. And
Yes.
I just wanted to bring us back a little bit to what you're doing now. So you've come through, you went through the mental health unit, um, at, and after that you actually got back on track. So and then
I did.
started focusing more on suicide awareness, and I think what I wrote here is you got off the street because you seriously wanted your life back, and you found along the way that finding resources for veterans with PTSD was like pulling teeth. I think you referred to it as, and then you started writing in the mental health
Yes.
community, and
Well,
in
what I realized with is even trying to find resources for me as a civilian, they were few and far between. And they also had, even the medical community had the natural reaction, well, you're not a combat veteran, you don't have PTSD. It's like, no, no, no. I had trauma and I realized where it came from.
yeah,
And yeah, it is PTSD.
yeah, yeah,
And even as I grew from that and learned from that, I still found that, I realize the veterans are having severe difficulties getting help and everything too,
mm,
but it goes for the civilian side too. You can't get people to talk to you that are trauma informed that can help you move forward. And I think that's the important part that I wanted to get across once I started writing in March, that we need to do better. We need to really address it medically.
mm,
And it's not just a mental health issue. PTSD and a lot of the other mental health illnesses that come up, they have physical effects too. Chronic pain is associated with it. Headaches are associated with it. It's not just mental illness. There's a lot of things in combination. Even your gut health has an effect on how your mental health is doing.
mm.
And whether you've had trauma or not as a child repeatedly, or whether it was just one traumatic situation that seems to, really bother you and put you in PTSD level 2, I think everybody has to step back and realize that we can't brush these things under the carpet anymore
No,
and assume that we can function. It can't happen.
yeah, I agree. And so you've you're putting together an amazing march so that people who are veterans and in groups from across the world, so we've got US, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, are all going to be marching in the Global Veterans Walk, which is what you're organising
Yep,
on June
yep,
29th
and
of 2019, and you're going to be
right.
walking up to a base as a veterans group and raising suicide awareness, and awareness around PTSD. Is that correct?
Right. Yes, and it's not meant to be a protest. It's so we're not calling it a march. We're calling it a walk
A
event,
walk,
and it
did I?
is
Sorry
to.
if I said March.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Uh, That's okay. We had actually started out calling it that, and then we reevaluated the message we want to get
I
across.
like it.
We really want, yeah, we really want to keep it not a remembrance, but I know it will honor some of the families that have suffered from suicide already.
Yeah.
But it will be a walk to raise awareness, to get a point across in 4 different countries within the same 24-hour time period, and bring up the rough sleeper issue and the homelessness.
Okay.
Uh,
Because
and with those conversations, each country will be able to say, okay, this publicly is what we've seen on the news now. We're raising awareness. We're not pointing any fingers. We want to have a conversation about this because the medical community, as well as the veterans community, have to step up the bar in order to support those that are having issues.
yeah,
And the veterans have suffered for many years, and it hasn't been addressed until it was forced to be addressed by the VA, and they actually had to get that passed in order for it to be on the books. But the Vietnam veterans had suffered for many years and still do, and never had an opportunity to get treatment, to get help, to get assistance. And many of them became homeless too.
I'm quickly, while you're talking, I'm going to look up the statistics of veterans sleeping rough in Sydney, because I know that it's very, very high, and a lot of the work that I do is trying to get that spotlight onto the veterans in Sydney too who are homeless, because I work with a few of them in Sydney as well. But I just want to see if I can find a current statistic. So could you let people know about what they can do while I look up this stat to shine a light on and become part of the Global Veterans Walk?
Well, really what we're going to do is we're going to post on Instagram interviews from each country, different veteran, and they're going to speak about their concerns, whether it's reintegration, getting back in touch with their families, finding work, feeling like they're part of the community again. They're having definite issues that not only with the PTSD that they're suffering from being in combat, but also from coming home and trying to get readjusted. So we need to share those resources. There are a lot of nonprofits out there that are stepping up to the bat, but I think all in all, we need to work together as a team and be supportive as families, especially if someone is suffering within the family. There are a few things that if you've had a head injury, or if you started suffering PTSD or CPTSD, if you have someone that you trust, I would start talking to that person and really kind of review the little decisions that you think are insignificant during your life at the time that you're sick. Have someone bounce those off with you. Don't give up your vehicles. Don't give up your home. Don't give up your financial status with your job. Actually see if you can be put on medical leave so that it kind of retains your job and you have something for the future. I want people to realize that this isn't the end of your life. It's not retirement or forced retirement. This is just a bump in the road, and you can meet the challenges. It's not easy, but you can conquer them one by one, step by step, and day by day, and you can get better. And sometimes you have to deal with the triggers every day, and they may not go away. They may stay with you for life. I know a lot of people personally have reached out to me, and they've been going through it for years, and I feel deeply for them. But they've had repeated trauma, and that causes a lot more damage to the brain. That takes a lot of work to kind of rework your brain and go past it and work with the triggers and try and have a life. But it is possible. I'm not saying you're going to be able to go back to the life you had, but you can build a life on top of it and move forward.
Yeah. Well,
and the more you can keep your family involved, the better.
Okay.
That kind of support really changes the dynamic of your outcome.
And I'm thinking, Carolyn, that those nights when you were on the street and you were really, really anxious, we know that anxious symptoms sometimes manifest in aggression or fear, or just coming across, as like a bit over the top, because we're very, very scared and very, very upset, and sometimes the anxiety, that's how it manifests. I see that in a lot of people as a clin psych now. When they come in to talk to me, a lot of the time, if they're really cranky and upset, I know that they're really, really anxious, and we've got to get to the bottom of the thought and find out what it is. And a lot of it is from being terrified and scared. And really, I don't want you to feel too terrible about that, because it's a really, really common thing that you did. And if you were texting and were being a little bit mean during that time, then really kind of okay. There's a lot more going on there.
the whole journey with me is and I see it with other mental health patients that talk to me and reach out, and they realize the same thing. There are people that are going to say that and realize that this could happen to them too.
Yeah.
And they're going to be okay with it, and they're going to help, or they're going to help you move on, or they're going to remain friends, or they're going to remain family. The people that walk away were not truly friends to begin with, number one. And number two, they're afraid it could happen to them. In all honesty, they see that risk for them. Not that it's contagious, but they realize how quickly it could
Oh,
happen
in a
in
heartbeat.
just a matter of, yeah.
Yeah.
And they walk away, and they feel safer if they walk away and not try and still be your friend and communicate with you.
Well,
This is not your fault.
yeah.
Yeah, and I've learned to accept that that's not my fault.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful. I had a couple of people that routinely checked on me. My family did check on me too, but for me, being a rough sleeper and having the police officer check on me once a week, it was okay at first. But then it got to be nerve-wracking, and I'll be honest. I wasn't getting harassed. That's not what I'm saying, but that they actually stopped and talked to me. It made me feel more nervous that because I was homeless, they might arrest me for what appeared like loitering,
Yes.
even though I was just walking through the neighborhood. I realized that not each police officer knew my story. There were a few that did, and a few that came and really connected and actually brought me dinner.
Nice.
And then
Nice.
there was the fire department that knew too,
Yeah.
and actually brought me a shirt to where I was staying and left it for me. And I didn't feel like at the time I was worthy because I was still going through the trauma, to be honest. And the thing is, you are worthy. You shouldn't be on the street. You should be at least in a room, and you should move forward with your life. You deserve to be happy. It took me that length of time to figure that out.
Yeah. And I just want to validate where you are now, Carolyn, because from somebody who hasn't known you through the trauma, and I've met you on the other side as somebody who's a very, very powerful mental health advocate and a connector of services, and it seems to me that you pretty much know everybody. So, and a lot of people trust you, and a lot of people talk to you, and it seems to me, and I have a master's degree, that you are in an amazing place, and I want to validate you in public right now to let you know that from the woman that I see, and I talk to you pretty much every day on all sorts of social media platforms, that the job that you're doing is incredible. The stigma reduction, the fact that you talk about your journey, the fact that you empower other people, and I see how much you care about other people out there in all, and especially, you know, even the latest little girl that we're talking to, and Damo's Law, who's had her brother who had paranoid schizophrenia suicide last year when the services didn't, she said, weren't helping very much, and you and I are now talking to her. The fact that you've reached out to her, and you and her and I are going to create a SEMPI group that people can come into and talk to us and learn SEMPI and go through, and she's got a whole stack of stuff going on with her at the moment, and I see you supporting her.
I know.
She's a young woman, and that's an amazing job, and I just want people to know that you're in a very, very different space, whoever's watching this video, and that I trust you and I believe in you, and I can call you one of my friends. I'm happy to do that, and yeah, I just really admire you, and I'm very grateful that I've been able to connect with you. And
Elise, I'm very humbled to be here. You know, I was, and I type it repeatedly from March that I'm very humbled that people reach back out to me and they allow me to share my story and they feel comfortable sharing with me. And it's, for a while there, just thinking about the mission and the veterans and the civilians that I was trying to get the group started for. Um, my heart is there because of the family history we have. I finally had the nerve to write up about my mom trying to commit suicide.
Okay.
But a lot of the things my mom taught me brought me here to the other side.
Yeah.
Um, it was about survival and it was about moving forward and actually trying to help other people. She didn't get strong enough to get past her trauma, but the groundwork she set for me was both, in the homeless category, the rough sleeper category, and at the same time survival mode. Because if she hadn't spent so much time teaching me classical music, I honestly believe I wouldn't have spent so much time healing by myself, being a rough sleeper, trying to listen to the classical music again and trying to feel those memories again that brought me home. And that helped pull me through to the realization that I didn't need to be on the street. And so when I talk to someone who's a rough sleeper in town, and I have a few I'm helping,
Yeah.
I try and stimulate a conversation of, don't you miss it? Don't you miss having a job? Don't you miss having your family? Is this where you want to be? I try and bring that connection to them and call them by their first name, and let them know that they're not invisible to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's definitely an invisible society, and being a woman, it's even more
Yeah,
treacherous.
and dangerous. But on that note, I've just found the statistics on people who are sleeping rough in Australia who used to be Australian Defence Force soldiers, and it's basically 1 in 20 homeless people surveyed are military veterans here in Sydney. So there are
Yeah.
116,000 Australians sleeping rough at the moment, and this was 24th of April 2018. This article was written. And so it says here that research has been going on since 2010 in which homelessness services, mostly in our inner cities, have interviewed more than 8,000 people who don't have a home, including those sleeping on the street. And the study has found that 1 in 20 of the 8,370 homeless people interviewed over the past 8 years were ex-military personnel. That's actually 5%. Most of these, close to 400, were men, and about 15%, which is 71 people, were women.
Yeah. Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
So yeah, that's that. But we could talk about homelessness all the time, or for a very, very long time. But I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I just want to go through the SEMPI model with you, if you don't mind, just to give people an idea of how we can use it. So do you think, having been on the street, and I want you to answer me very honestly here, if somebody that you trusted was coming to you and going through this with you, do you think it would have made any difference?
Yes. Yeah,
In what way?
absolutely. Um, I wouldn't have felt abandoned. I wouldn't have felt invisible. I wouldn't have felt when you're rough sleeping, you feel rejected um, by not only family but friends. Um, you've spent a life building love and relationships, and to have to suffer in that way in silence and be alone as a rough sleeper, it's very damaging to your self-esteem. You have a lot of shame, you have a lot of guilt. Um, I even had a friend walk me through exercises for the shame and the guilt. And I was a rough sleeper at the time, but he reached out and made me walk through it, and it was very painful. It was very, very much an education, and I had to pick myself literally up off the floor in order to uh, push through those feelings and become myself again. I think if I would have had that emotional connection with a conversation on at least an everyday basis, my healing would have gone a lot faster.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have made the decision a lot sooner because, to be quite honest, once the car broke down and the PTSD flashbacks stopped coming in as heavy, I just had nightmares and the anxiety at night. Um, I think that should have been the turnover date for me not to be homeless anymore. And I've evaluated that in my mind. What could I have changed to shorten this healing time span that I had in reality? And I'm not disappointed by it. Um, I want to use it as a tool for someone else so that they will be able to move forward quicker than I did and see that they're moving past the pain and the hurt that they're suffering. And these questions and Senpai hit right on target. Sleeping was an issue. Emotion was an issue. Um, was I feeling my best as far as survival? That was an issue. Was I feeling a part of the community? Absolutely not. My physical health, I was in pain just from the tension of sleeping rough. Um, that's kind of hard to describe because the pain really takes you all over. So it was much past the concussion and more like just joint pain all over.
Sleeping on
But if you
concrete.
would have asked me on the street, I would have told you as a rough sleeper, I'm doing fine.
So when
I
when
did,
you were rough sleeping, if I'd come up to you, and while we're talking about it, for those of you who don't know the Senpai model, basically I've written the Senpai model. What happens if you ask someone, are you okay, and they actually say no? So this is where the Senpai model comes in. So if you're sitting
right,
with someone and you say, are you okay, and they say no, know what to do at this point. This is not a counseling
right,
model. It's a listener and a sharer model. So we will be
right,
showing you, I will be the listener and Carolyn is going to be the sharer. So the listener asks the questions, and there's 5 different letters that Senpai stands for. It's an acronym. So S stands for sleep and safety. This is basically the 5 human needs in one brochure, in one question. So when we're saying to someone, how's your senpai, we're asking them, how was your sleep and safety last night, which is pivotal to somebody who's been sleeping on the street, as Carolyn was. And we're asking them, how are you feeling emotionally? Because emotion, the need for love, empathy, and to matter is a human need and a human right. M stands for meet your basic survival needs. So the need for water, food, clothing, that's what M stands for. And then there's the 8 little questions inside M. Then we've got P for physical health. So the need to feel physically well in your body is a basic human need. And then I for inclusion in community. The need to be included in community is pivotal to know that we matter as people, and if we do not feel that we matter in our communities, we're in terrible trouble. And so when we're
yes,
going through Senpai, and I ask, and I'll go through it with you to give you, everybody who's watching us out there, an example of how I would use this with someone. So Carol, and it is on the street, it's across America on the street, it's in Canada, it's in New Zealand, it's in Fiji, it's going into Manila, it's going into Tondo in Manila, into the slums. It's in Australia. The police are using it. The domestic violence workers are using it. Women in domestic violence are using it before they go into court with the workers. It's basically all through our community. It's very easy to get a hold of. It's a free model. I'll send you the PDF. I just run through it with you. We've got over 50 videos on YouTube about how to use Senpai as well. and the drug and alcohol groups are using it. You can start a group of your own anywhere you want in the world. So we'll go through it. So Carolyn, sleep and safety. How was your sleep overall in the last night or last week?
Yeah. In the last week, my sleep was kind of okay. I'm having a little bit of anxiety thinking of obtaining the next job because I've worked 2 jobs in the last 14 months on top of it, and I'm switching jobs. So that's making me a little nervous to go to sleep at night. But once I sleep, I'm feeling pretty good. It's just getting to that point.
Okay, so question 2 is, when you started to go to sleep, did any thoughts keep you awake, and was there a thought that stood out? So basically, you've just answered that before. We've had to go through the next couple of little question bubbles. So Carolyn's indicated that she's having a bit of anxiety about a new job, starting a new job. And then there's an invitation in number 4. Would you like to speak about this thought? Would you like to? So it's an open invitation now for me to see if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think when I have those thoughts and I'm just about ready to go to sleep, what I try and do is talk myself into a list, actually, of what I'm going to accomplish the next day, and just that I have faith in myself, that I will get things accomplished, and that I will be able to eventually obtain a job. It's just going to take me a little bit longer than I anticipated.
Okay.
But yeah, I do sit and go through that in my head, and just to kind of relieve, the anxiety a little bit, because it does pop out, oh, I don't have a job. And that's the first thought. And then it's like, okay, let's talk about this, and let's think about it rationally and how we're going to approach it the next day so that it becomes a positive instead of a negative.
Okay, so I put sleep and safety in as the first question, because when we're lying down at night, that and all the distractions have stopped from the day, the thoughts that come through at that point are the ones that really, really we need to look at. So that Carolyn's just given us an example of what that looks like. And then number 5 is, are you feeling safe in the place where you sleep each night? And are you feeling calm about sleeping?
Yes, absolutely. Compared to if you would have asked me this when I was a rough sleeper, I did not feel safe at all. There was no place that I felt that I was invisible at night just to be safe. And that was my biggest worry of being alone. And I didn't join the rough sleeper community for many reasons, and one was my personal safety. I didn't want to be abused and end up in a worse situation than I already was. For me, when I was rough sleeping on the street, the one thing that I constantly reminded myself of was that even though I was talking on occasion to another rough sleeper, and they've been a rough sleeper for years, I would look at them and realize that I still had my frame of mind. I still had felt like I had purpose, and that this was going to change for me. But for them, they saw it as an eternity of a life sentence. And I did see the differences in that, and it helped me get through on a daily basis of just being alone. It really did. And to me, the thought was, God, they're really in pain, and I'm not even near that point. Not that I wasn't suffering, but I could tell the difference of how much their despair had taken over their life.
Okay, so if we go back, I'm just going to do a bit of driving here, so I'm going to drive this because we're running out of time, so I'm going to move us along a little bit. So down the bottom here on number 7, it says, are you feeling calm about sleeping, or do you need extra support? and then the empowering question of what sort of support do you feel would help you? Do you need extra talking time, or would you like to see a healthcare professional? Would you like to have another cup of tea with me and we can just go over that? It's just about listening and sharing and empathy and love, and you having me holding space for you and you being able to speak for as long as you like. And you can go over the sleep question for as long as you like if you want to, or if you feel like you're sick of talking about that, we can move on to E for emotions.
Let's go ahead and move on to E for emotion.
Okay. So are you feeling any upsetting emotion or emotions at the moment? Example, crying, withdrawn, unsettled, or not sure? And if so, is there a story behind the emotion that you would like to share? That's number 3 question.
No, I'm not feeling any emotion or severe emotion other than maybe the slight anxiety when I go to sleep at night. No, because most of the day has been really good, and yeah, I don't have any issues whatsoever that I can even think of. I'm sure if it was 4 years ago, that would be different.
So what emotion could you have been experiencing back then? For an example.
For an example, being a rough sleeper, definitely moments of tears, feeling withdrawn from family, and just unsettled of your future.
Okay.
As a rough sleeper, that would come across highly.
Okay. So if at this point the person that you're listening to, who's the sharer, doesn't really have any emotional stuff going on, we can move on to M, which is meet your basic survival needs. So Carolyn, have you had enough to eat and drink today?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and do you have enough clothing to keep you warm or cool at the moment?
Yes, I have enough clothing and definitely enough food, drinking plenty of water, and just trying to keep my my diet in check and make sure everything is good.
Okay, so that's really good. So sometimes if somebody says, for example, people in the who are elderly and isolated, they will often answer no, they haven't had enough to eat and drink today. And a lot of the kids in school will also say that when we teach this model in schools. And do you have enough clothing to keep you warm or cool? That, well, there's a lot of people in society who just don't. And yeah, so
including young students. Yeah.
Yep. So it just goes through. Are you okay to finish the conversation, or would you need some extra support? And then another empowering question. If so, what sort of support do you feel you would need? Extra talking time, and then down the bottom, would you like to go and get some food, water, or clothes when we finished SEMPI? So it's a very practical model as well as covering all aspects of physical and mental health. So let's go on P and find out how Carolyn's feeling physically. So how's your physical body feeling, Carolyn? And are you noticing any unusual symptoms or any pain?
Well, I got some lower hip pain that's been bothering me, but I've actually started exercising this week, and I'm trying to work through it. And hopefully that will readjust out and take care of itself. I've been doing a lot of walking in the last 3.5 years, and I think that's had a little bit of an effect on my back. So I just want to make sure that it stays as good as it is, because normally I'm a jogger.
Wow, okay, it's something I cannot do. Okay, jogging. I'll get on the elliptical, but not jogging. Forget that. That's way too hard.
Yeah, it is hard, but it's it really I wouldn't say cleanses the mind. It really clears the mind, and it pushes your body maybe a little to the point where you can rely on it better, and you have more strength and more balance. And for me, that's important because when I was injured and being a rough sleeper, I did not have that balance, and I weighed a lot less. Um, I was not in good shape when I was a rough sleeper, and the balance was an issue. So yeah, now that I'm better and work a lot and also do the mental health stuff, I am trying to eat better, drink more water, and I'd love to get back to my running and at least, be able to go out and do things that I did before.
Well, when we get
But
together, I'll just wait at the finish line with a bottle of water for you, okay?
very good.
Okay, so all right. So a couple of the other questions. Do you feel like you're coping or do you need some practical support? And do you have any other physical symptoms that you would like to talk about?
No, I think for the most part, I'm doing pretty good. I'm coping very well. I tend to make lists and stay organized and try and keep that in my thought process also. It also helps develop my memory, which I
Mm-hmm.
noticed from the head injury is sometimes an issue, but we're working
Yeah,
through it.
just get those
So,
neural pathways
yeah,
working because the brain is amazing. The plasticity of the brain is amazing. And the more
yes,
work you put into it, the more thinking you do, the more reading, the more writing, the more music you listen to, the brain's
yes,
forming neural pathways all the time as we speak and getting better and better and healing and healing and healing.
yes, yeah. And I think a lot of people don't pay attention to that, and they think that they are stuck in
Oh
that way.
gosh, no, yes.
So,
Oh my goodness. So,
yeah,
well, we'll
yeah,
just go back to here. So at the bottom of every single one of these questions, it says, are you feeling well enough or do you need some extra support? What sort of support do you feel would help you? And do you need to have extra talking time or would you like to see a healthcare professional? So this if
hmm,
it becomes too big for the two people who are the listener and the sharer, and a problem does come out that is just too big for either of you to handle, go and get help at this point. But in the meantime, use
right,
the model so that everyone's feeling
right,
heard and
yeah,
validated and important. And let's look at
hmm,
inclusion in community. So this is really, really important. Being included in community is pivotal. So, Carolyn, are you feeling included in your community at the moment? And if not, would
yeah.
you like to talk to me now and I can just listen without judgment?
No, I think I've got between all of the communities, I'm feeling very included.
Okay, yeah, you're pretty out there really in social media, but
Yeah.
in what about hang on a sec, you know what? I've just caught myself deviating off the questions. Don't do that out there. The psychotherapist in me's coming through. Smack. Stick to the questions. Okay. So you're feeling pretty connected. So we don't really need to go any further. So for an example, if somebody said to me, let me have a little think. So people who I talk to who are going through chemo will often say that they're not feeling connected to community anymore because they're very, very sick and a lot of their friends are still getting on with their lives and they came to visit and
Yeah.
delivered the flowers and haven't been seen since. And so
Yep.
there's a big disconnect with people who are in hospital or people who are having chemotherapy or people who
Hmm.
are in terrible grief because they've lost loved ones will often say,
Yes.
"Oh, once my partner died, everybody came over and everyone's making lasagnas and the flowers and the funeral, and then nobody's been around, and I actually haven't spoken to someone for 2 weeks." So
Yes.
and it's like, oh my goodness, well, I'm really glad I'm going through the SEMPI model with you. So, and it
Yeah.
just goes through, is this experience hard or upsetting for you? Is there anything else you'd like to talk about now? Are you feeling settled or do you need some extra support? What sort of support do you feel would help you? And do you need extra talking time? And again, or do you need to see a healthcare professional? So that's the model. So how's your senpai out there? So, and then what happens at this point is you can now become the swap, because it's an reciprocal model. So now, if we had time, Carolyn could start asking me all of these questions, and then we drop down to a deeper level conversation, and we can hear exactly how we're feeling mentally, physically, included in community, the whole lot. And we learn heaps more about each other, and you've all just learnt stacks about Carolyn. And on that note, I want to say thank you so much, Carolyn, for talking to me and sharing your very, very difficult experience and all of the really important lessons that you've learnt from all of the different things that you've experienced. And thank you, huge gratitude for the empowering of the communities that you're working with at the moment. Thank you for going through Senpai with me. Now, this is going to be going up on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on my web pages, which is www.senpai.net, and you'll see it on Carolyn's as well. So everybody will be able to watch this interview, and if you're already not following Carolyn, follow Carolyn. Okay.
Don't forget to follow Elise. Follow Elise.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, and I'll stop the recording now, and we'll have a little chat. So you stay there, but we'll just say goodbye to everyone, and I'll just grab a quick photo to put up as well. So thank you, everybody. We'll say goodbye now, and we'll get our photo so that we can use it in marketing, and talk to you all on Senpai Real Conversations next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.